much community interest in what Mr. Ransom had to say with the Interracial Dialogue Group that we thought here at the library, as part of our Black History Month celebrations, we would invite him to come speak tonight. So I do thank you all for coming to this program, and truly this is what libraries do. We present all opinions, that's our goal, all opinions on our shelves and in our programming. And we welcome the community to come to us also to make recommendations on your interests and what you might like to see here. Truly, truly, please come and talk to me. I do have just a couple of quotes. This is from Lady Bird Johnson. Perhaps no place in any community is so totally democratic as the town library. The only entrance is interest. So you are all very interested tonight, and I thank you. Another quote came from someone who is here this evening and who came to talk to me about this program tonight. And I thought his statement was wonderful. And he said, "The public library is the Switzerland of this county." To continue a couple of programs, can't stop talking about the library. On Monday, all children are welcome to our hamster party. There's no school that day, and that's from 1 until 3:30. And the movie Humphrey will be shown, and it will be shown right here in the library. We are closed that day, so the kids are welcome to spread out here on the carpet and enjoy the movie Humphrey. And then to continue the celebration of Black History Month, on Sunday, February 28th at 2 o'clock, we're having a celebration of drama, music, and dance. I know Ron Estreet is coming, whom we just met this evening, some of you, and many other wonderful African-American talents, including the shanty singers. They are going to be here for this event. So we are very pleased to present and sponsor Mr. Michael Ransom in this evening's program entitled The Three Facets of White Privilege. And this concept originated in 1988 with a woman named Peggy McIntosh. She was a faculty member at Wellesley College in Massachusetts. We look forward to his interesting conversation and lecture, which will last about 45 minutes. And then there will be about 15 minutes of a question and answer session. And we hope that for the sake of time, if we run out of time with questions, that we have some wonderful refreshments in where the magazines and the new books are. Please have a cup of coffee and a cookie. Talk with your neighbors about what you've heard this evening, or talk with Mr. Ransom at that time. And lastly, I have been asked to say, the opinions expressed in this presentation and on the following slides are solely those of the presenter and not those of Northumberland County Public Schools. So without further ado, welcome Mr. Ransom.
I wonder if anybody in this room is assuming that I'm not intelligent enough to make a meaningful presentation tonight.
Louder.
I wonder if anybody in this audience is assuming that I'm not intelligent enough to give a meaningful presentation tonight. I wonder if they will be listening intently to every word I speak, checking for grammatical errors and inaccuracies. Is there anyone in this audience who is afraid of me? Who sees me as a potential threat? Maybe intimidated by my presence? I wonder if all the black people in the room tonight are saying to themselves, Mr. Ransom, please don't say nothing stupid and embarrass her. Well, if you've never wrestled with these types of questions, or these questions, then there's a very strong chance you have privilege. You see, I wish I had the privilege of not having to think about such menial, trivial type questions before I speak to the parents of my students at school, before I speak to my teachers and other educational friends, and tonight, before I speak to you. But I don't have such privilege. You see, those questions are a fundamental part of who I am. These self-confidence, self-worth stealing type questions, they got their origin through a system of misinformation, misinterpretation, misrepresentation, propaganda, and stereotype. One day these questions came to my mind's door, and they knocked on it. I don't recall how old I was at the time. I don't even recall letting them in. But somehow they managed to infiltrate my mind, lodge themselves in my subconscious, where they decided to take a permanent vacation. Every now and again, though, I can feel them creep up to my consciousness, where they take off their regular clothes, put on the bathing suits, and dive into my pool of thought, contaminating the water and polluting my thinking. Now, usually they stay dormant back here, but every now and again they become active. And I find that they become active when I'm in a setting with a lot of people, and many of the people don't share my culture or my race. Recently, I had the opportunity, I'm going to get a little bit louder. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit the governor's mansion in the city of Richmond to celebrate the successes of one of my teachers. And of course, when I walked through this front door, I was taken aback by the beauty, by the majesty, and by the history of this place. But I also became keenly aware of the fact that out of the 150 or so people in that room, there were only about 10 to 12 black people in that entire room. As I walked throughout the night and met people, I had the opportunity to meet the Secretary of Education for Virginia. I met all kinds of interesting people. I enjoyed mingling and networking. I met the governor, talked to him for a few minutes. Oh, it was a wonderful night. I'd say probably midway through the night, I met a principal from Northern Virginia. She was a white lady, about 60 years old. And we had some wonderful conversation. She was telling me how diverse her school system was. And I was telling her how non-diverse my school system was. We had wonderful conversation. I would say probably about midway through our conversation, she said, you know what, Mr. Ransom, I'm going to get a bite to eat. And I said, I could eat. I'll go with you. So we got in line. And back here in this area, you can't see it that well, but back there in that area, all the way in the back, there was a long table filled with food. And from where I was standing, I couldn't see what was on the table, but I knew there was a lot of food back there on that table. So we got in line. There was about 20 people in front of us. And we're still talking. And when you're talking, sometimes the line seems to go pretty fast. So we're about now halfway to that table. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I felt the splash. No, it wasn't an external splash. It was an internal splash. One of those self-questioning questions dived right into my pool of thought. And I saw myself in line talking to this young lady and thinking, Lord, please don't let there be any fried chicken on that table. And so I'm in line and I'm talking to this young lady, and she doesn't know that I'm feeling this internal conflict inside. I was just as cool then as I am right now. But I'm preparing myself just in case there's fried chicken up there. I say to myself, well, maybe you can just ignore it and act as if it doesn't exist. Then I said, no, that'd be too obvious. Can't do that. I said, maybe I'll get an easy-to-eat piece like a drumstick. Then I got a visualization of me biting that drumstick. I said, maybe I can't do that either. So my hands are sweating now. I'm getting a little bit nervous as I inch closer and closer to that table. Finally, I get to the table. I look at it and peruse that spread. And I say, thank you, Lord. Not a piece of fried chicken anyway. I was so preoccupied with that chicken, though, that as I went down the table getting my food, I neglected to see that large fruit display at the very end of the table that had on grapes, apples, strawberries, cherries, pineapples, and watermelon. So all the people in front of me grabbed their fruit, not even thinking about it. And of course, I didn't want to look like I didn't want to get fruit. So I grabbed some grapes, a couple strawberries, and the pineapple ring. Totally ignored the watermelon as if it didn't even exist. So once my plate was complete, I went around the table and continued to mingle with people. And secretly, nobody knows this, but every black person that came by with a plate, I glanced at to see if they had watermelon on it. It was 7 or 8 people that came by. And I did not see one plate with watermelon. Well, they might not have liked watermelon, that's fair. Or they could have felt some of the same pressures I felt. You see, I won't know. I didn't ask them. But once I left the governor's mansion that night and walked back to my car, and I reflected on that night and thought about all the people in there with their insecurities, with their flaws, with their drawbacks and setbacks, one thing was for sure, is that that nice white lady I was talking to and all the other white people in that room, I bet you not one had an item of food so negatively tied to their race that they would do anything in their power to avoid it. That's an example of white privilege. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Someone told me not long ago that Northumberland was ready for this conversation, and I didn't know whether that was true or not. But by looking at the audience tonight, you can't see you, but I can see you, and to see all the different colors, to me, is a beautiful sight. And I believe, yes, Northumberland is ready for this conversation. I'd like to take a moment to thank a couple people. I'd like to thank Hal and Miss Lucia Lord, who's not here tonight, for organizing that wonderful interracial conversation group. I'd also like to thank Miss Alice Cooper and Miss Eve. I don't know your last name, Miss Eve.
Jordan. Like
Miss
Michael.
Eve Jordan. Like Michael?
Like Michael.
Thank you guys so much for inviting me and holding strong to that invitation. I really appreciate that as well. A couple of housekeeping things. The first thing, I think we have some paper and pencil for everybody, I'm not sure, or if you want to ask questions. My presentation is 45 minutes. I don't want to belabor it by stopping and going, so I would ask that you hold your questions and your comments until after it's over, and I will try my best to answer any questions that you may have. Lastly, this presentation, I'm going to say it fast, is about 2 hours worth of information compacted into 45 minutes. So I am producing a book as we speak on this very information. If you would be interested in this book, of course, you can get it in June. I'll have it available in June. Ms. Tasha Lee, where are you tonight? Ms. Tasha Lee, stand up, please. If you are interested in getting this book, give Ms. Tasha Lee your name, your phone number, your address, and $10. And you will get this book sent to you this summer. Awesome summer reading. Are we ready to begin?
Yes.
Now, the 3 facets of white privilege. The first facet is the one I won't talk very much about tonight, because I think everybody's mind, when you hear the term white privilege, it pretty much defaults to a certain mindset. Everybody thinks something a little different. All right, so tonight I will use the term white people a lot, and I will use black people a lot. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm overgeneralizing, so I might say some, not all, because not of anybody in any group all think the same way. But generally, the reason this word is so provocative, it evokes so many different kinds of emotions, because what comes to a white person's mind when they hear the term white privilege might be totally different from what comes to a black person's mind when they hear the word white privilege. Now, I'm thinking that a white person who hears the term white privilege looks at their own situation and says, I don't have a whole bunch of materials. I'm not made out of money. I don't have that American Express card that says white privilege on it. I've worked my entire life for everything I got. White privilege, I don't have white privilege. And it would make that person pretty angry. And rightfully so. I don't have a problem with that. Now, when black people hear the term white privilege, we don't think about materials. We don't think about materials white people might have. Because we know plenty of white people who don't have a lot of materials. And we know a lot of black people who do have a lot of materials. So we don't think about materials when we hear the term white privilege. Most of us think about facts of perception, is what we perceive. It's those little small inequities, those large inequalities that we see. See, we base it on treatment. So if a white person goes into a department store, the cashier might automatically assume that that person did a shop. Well, if you're an African American and go into that store, they might automatically assume that you could be there up to no good. See, these are the types of things we see. So when you introduce the word white privilege, you already have two different definitions. So if a black person goes to a white person and says, hey, you have white privilege, and that white person doesn't have a whole bunch of materials or resources, they're going to get very angry. And that conversation is going to stop right there. Because we're having two different angles coming together, which is going to lead to explosions. It's going to lead to an explosion. Okay? So my job tonight is not to change minds. Whatever you think, whatever your brain defaults to when you see the term or hear the term white privilege, that's just it. It would be easier for me to send each of you to Mars than to change your perception of that. Now, what I want to do tonight, though, is share with you the parts of white privilege that you might not be that familiar with. And those two facets. One is the ideological facet. The other is the subconscious facet. The ideological facet of white privilege has to do with the origination of our thinking. Where did our thinking come from? How do we think? Why do we think the way we think today? Well, there's a reason why. We're going to discuss that tonight. Subconscious white privilege, that's the privilege that white folk don't even know they have. But get this, most black people don't even know they have it. Oh, we're going to find that thing out tonight. All right, so let's see. White privilege. I didn't use Peggy McIntosh's definition. There are so many other definitions out there. I didn't use the definition at all. I just took the synonyms of the word privilege. All right? And if you take the adjective white, add any of these words, advantage, exemption, immunity, benefit, authority, if you take any of these words, add it to the adjective white, you have white privilege, white advantage. When I was a school teacher and I taught for 13 years, whenever I taught a concept to my students, I needed to find an equal and opposite concept to use as a comparative metric to better understand that concept I was trying to teach. In other words, if I was teaching a lesson about good, G-O-O-D, then it's almost impossible to understand the concept good if you don't have a clear understanding of bad. How can I teach about darkness if you don't really understand light? I use the same model tonight. See this term right here, black loss? Don't worry about looking it up. I just created it for this presentation. And I took all the antonyms of the word privilege, right? And I just added on the adjective black. So now we have an equal and opposite concept to holistically understand the concept white privilege. Now, white privilege can never be looked at as an individual dynamic. Never be an individual dynamic that causes conflict and discord. Picture me going to a white person who may not have a lot of resources, who might be even depending on government assistance, and saying, hey, you have white privilege. That person probably would look at me in the eye and say words that probably should not be uttered within a 10-mile radius of a church. And rightfully so, because it's not an individual dynamic. It's a group dynamic. And if you want to figure out which group has white privilege in any heterogeneous, diverse society, ask yourself this question. Which group holds the political, economic, and social power? Ask yourself that. Because if you find out that group, that is the group that sets the standards for all other groups in this country or in that country. Ask yourself that question. Which group, not individuals, which group holds the social, economic, and political power? That is the privileged group. That's the standard set for every other group to rise to. The term black loss I will not be defining until a little bit later on in the presentation. Now, anybody know what this is? All right, yeah, you guys have heard it. Shakespeare says one of his plays, "The world is your oyster." Well, what I want you to do is take a picture of this in your brain, store it in there, because we're going to need it later for the next slide. This is an oyster. Picture this oyster 2 times bigger than this. Let's say 100 times bigger than this. And these are pearls. So picture this oyster filled with all kinds of pearls. Big ones, medium ones, small ones, and tiny ones the size of, say, a grain of salt. Picture that. All right, keep that here, okay, because we're going to need it. We'll come back to it. Now, this slide right here has no words, but it's a very, very strong slide to illustrate white privilege. Now, the first point I want to make about this slide is that all these people on this slide all want the same things out of life. These are my white people in 2016. This is my white folk in the room tonight. These are my black folk in 2016. These are my black folk in the room tonight. This is us. All of us want the exact same thing. We have, I like to call it a biological, instinctual desire to make sure our children are safe and secure, that they have good homes to live in and stable environments. That's our desire. We all want that. Now, we also all live in a country that was built on, or either partly built on, the oppression of others. Now, the only way oppression can exist is if you have an oppressor and the oppressed. There's no other way the system of oppression can exist. Unfortunately, this paradigm lends itself to a certain hierarchical arrangement in which the oppressor is situated to the highest part of society, and the oppressed is situated at the bottom of that societal ladder. Hence, my arrangement or positioning of my characters here. Now, am I saying that these white people are oppressors? Absolutely not. They don't have time to be. See, what they're trying to do is make ends meet for their families. They're trying to get to that oyster and pull out as many pearls as they can to take care of their families. They don't have time to oppress. Now, am I saying that they have silver spoons in their mouths and they all are rich? No. Now, see, some of these folk were just as poor as these folk coming up. But what I am saying is that they have something called cultural capital. Oh, I love that term. Cultural capital or cultural value. It's automatic. They didn't ask for it. They don't even know they have it. It's just there. Because they belong to the culture that all other cultures need to rise to. They set the standard. Now look at this group right here. This group is in a very unique situation. This group has to learn what's acceptable by this group. And we're in the position to do it. You see, we are behind and below based on that hierarchical arrangement I just spoke about. And so we have to learn your history. We do. We have to understand what you find acceptable and unacceptable. We have to understand your mores, your folk ways, your norms. We have to understand your principles, your interests, and your values. We have to. If we want to get into this line, if we want to raise up into this line, we have no choice. I got a question for only the black folk in the room. Don't get mad at you white people. How many of your parents, black folks, said, if you want to be successful, you have to work twice? If you heard that in your house in some variants, raise your hand. I know it's 100%. I don't even got to count you. Because what our ancestors understood a long time ago, way before they saw this presentation, they knew that this dichotomy was there. You can just see it tonight. They knew it was there. They knew to get into this line, you had to be able to pull yourself up. You can't fit into that line unless you can pull yourself up. Am I making sense?
Yes.
So where did all this white privilege stuff come from anyway? Where did all this talk come from? Why are we even here tonight? Black people are stupid. They're dumb. They're slicksters and they're sly. All they want to do is eat up all our chicken. They need to go on back to Africa, what they need to do. Say, now, if Billy came in here and said that, there'd be some strange emotions going on. And let me tell you what would probably happen. The black people in the room would go into an immediate shame. It won't last long, probably 0.3 seconds. Slip right over into anger. And then I don't know what might happen after that. Now, the white folk in the room will slip into a very brief guilt, then an embarrassment, then a separation. You'll hear things like, hey, listen, his mother just raised him that way. I don't think that way. I don't know anything about that stuff. I'm from up north. Those are the two things that would happen in this room. Now, what we can do is easily dismiss him. I can say yes. Okay, I agree. He is ignorant. He's stupid. He's dumb and all those things. I can say that. I'll agree. But two questions would come to my brain. If you're stupid, if you're dumb, if you're ignorant, what kind of thinking is it that makes you believe that you are over an entire group of people then? That's the first question I'd ask. And the second question is a very simple question I would ask Billy. I would say, hey, where'd you get that information? Somebody would say, well, he got it from his parents. And I'd say, well, where did his parents get that information? And somebody would say, well, they got it from their parents. And then I'll say, well, where did they get that information from? And by this time, you got to see where I'm going with this. You see, Billy, we can dismiss. But I bet you won't dismiss this man. This is Carl von Linnaeus, called the father of taxonomy. Very respected in this day. They called him the great classifier. He put things into kingdoms. He wrote a book, I think I can get it right, a volume called Systema Naturae or something like that. And in the first volume, in the first edition, he put men, human races, into 4 categories. And because he's so brilliant, he told you everything you need to know about each one of them. It was the Native American, the European, the Asian man, and the African man. I'm not going to read all these things to you, but let me share some of these adjectives to you that he used to describe people. He said the American Indian was red, he was stubborn, and he was painted himself with red lines and things. I mean, this is supposed to be science now, but I could probably do this if I spent time with somebody, right? The European was white. He was inventive. He was gentle. And he was regulated by laws. So when I looked at these words and said gentle, in the midst of slavery, it makes sense to me. Now, the Asian man, he's yellow, he's haughty and greedy, and he's regulated by opinions. The African man, he's lazy. I heard that somewhere before. He has a flat nose. Females have no shame. He anoints himself with grease. I don't quite understand that. I like chicken, but I don't. And he was regulated by caprice, which means he's moody. Which, if you're suffering from some kind of traumatic experience, then you might be moody. But this is what this man said. And these things tend to stick. He's very intelligent. You can't dismiss him. He's smart. Johann Blumenbach, very, very interesting man as well. The first guy is Swedish born. This guy is German born. Anyway, he said Adam and Eve were white. They had kids. These kids went all over the nation, all over the world. Based on a poor diet and bad environmental factors, they turned black. But don't worry. Don't worry. If they eat right and change their environmental factors, they can become white again. I haven't found those foods yet. Hey, what about this gentleman here? His name is Voltaire. Voltaire was a satiristic writer, very clever man, very well respected. In fact, when I was in college, I had to read his book. It was called The Candide. Listen to this fellow. He was having an issue with some creationists, those people who believe that God created man in his image. I'm sorry. He was arguing with those guys. He said, no, God didn't create black people in his image. No way. Picture our divine maker with a flat black nose with little to no intelligence. You see. This is the information that was being dispersed out in this country to everybody's ears who could read and who could listen and who could understand it. So right now we can see white privilege being formalized and black loss also. When I say black loss, and I told you I was going to define this term a little bit later, I'm going to define it now. Black loss has nothing to do with losing political, economic, and social power, because you can't lose what you never had. But what you do lose is self-value. You lose self-identity. You lose self-confidence, self-worth, self-esteem. Benjamin Rush. Hey, black folk have something called Negroidism. Negro, black, Spanish, negro, black. Negroidism. It's a hereditary skin disease. Almost like leprosy, but it's non-contagious. Now, under that black skin, there's really some whiteness there. So my brain says, what white meat did you see under black skin? Unless you might have seen some kind of bad. Black. Anybody ever heard he busts his head to the white meat? Anybody ever heard that? So I'm wondering what this man might have seen to come up with that theory. But also he was a founding father because his name is found on the Declaration of Independence. So very respected man. Oh, this is black loss, guys, and white privilege. How about this guy here? One of the most respected men in all American history. It's debatable, but I would say he's one of them. He said, blacks smelled bad and were physically unattractive, required less sleep, were dumb, cowardly, and incapable of feeling grief. Advance it, therefore, as a suspicion only, blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstance, are inferior to whites in the endowment of mind and body. When this gentleman spoke, people listened, my dear friends. James Madison. Now, if the blacks must live with us, and we have to put them in our society, then we must always make sure that one species of oppression is there to replace the other. So he understood better than most people I've studied. He understood the difference between freedom and equality. They're not synonymous terms. You see, it's like if I were to see a pigeon in a cage, and I could see his spirit just leaving him, and I said, you know what? I'm going to set this pigeon free. I go and I rip open that cage. I grab that pigeon, and I say, you're free. But he has a rock tied to his leg. He's not going to be equal. Uncle A, the great emancipator. Some have even said he loved black folk. There are certain physical differences that will forever forbid the two races from living together. But if they must, one race must be assigned the superior position, the other race must be assigned the inferior position. I, as much as any other man, would prefer the superior position being assigned to the white race, and the inferior position being assigned to the black race. This is white privilege, and this is black loss. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. That song was written in 1767 by this gentleman here. Now, this gentleman was a slave ship captain who dealt with the trading and selling and all of those evil things with human beings. This is what he did. Now, you want to talk about white privilege and black loss. This song was written about 268 years ago by a man who traded human beings. The descendants of these very human beings that were on his ship sing a song almost every week, almost 300 years later. Oh, now we're talking about white privilege and black loss. Oh, it's getting heavy now. Let's change the course real quick. Everybody close your eyes. Let me just do something for me. I want you to picture your first car. 3, 2, 1. Open your eyes. Now, I need someone who's not afraid to speak in front of people. I need 4 people who's not afraid to come up and tell me what your first car was, to come up beside me and do that. If you're scared, don't worry about it. Anybody scared?
I'm not scared. Can I speak for you?
Oh, I tell you what. Yeah, it is kind of crowded, so just stand up for me. Don't move. Just stand up for me. All right, I got 1, 2, 3.
You got one over here.
I got my 4. I got it right here. Look, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Don't sit down. Just stand up even after you talk. Okay? Let's go with you, Steve.
Fiat Spider convertible, 1979.
Oh, okay. He gonna say it again a little bit louder.
1979 Fiat Spider convertible.
73 Chevy Nova.
79 black Mustang with a sunroof top.
1965 Chevelle Malibu.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, that was interesting. So let me tell you what I watched for with these guys that stood up and listened for. I watched their faces to see if that moment, that car brought them joy. Yes, it did. Okay, I can tell. And I listened for the level of specificity, how specific they were. You see, they had to go back 40 years, maybe 20, 30 years, and they had to go back through millions of files of pictures to get that picture. And they got it in 3 seconds, and they were very specific with it. So let me tell you why that is. It's because their brains and your brains and my brain, it's an associating organ. Oh, this is very important. It's an associating organ. That means it stores things in pictures. It stores things in symbols and pictures, not necessarily words. He went back and saw a picture, just as you did. You didn't see words. You were very eloquent with your words, but you saw pictures. Because the brain works like that. Now, this is where it gets really exciting. If I were to say to you, ma'am, what's your name?
Pam,
Pam, how are you?
I'm fine.
Pam, let's pretend that you're not from this planet, and I'm introducing you to Earth. And I say, Pam, snakes are very dangerous. Those little squiggly things, they're very dangerous. They'll bite you. She's taking this information, she's listening to me, and she might say, well, Mr. Ransom, you seem like a pretty sharp guy. I believe you. Snakes are dangerous. I'll stay away from them. Now, what if I said, Miss Pam, snakes are very dangerous. You probably should stay away from them. Now she's going to say, well, Mr. Ransom, I know I'm going to stay away from snakes. You see, because now we have not only the information, now we have the picture. The picture solidifies the truth. If it's a picture involved, then it becomes true. Now we know snakes are dangerous because she can see it. See, that information that came down through the years, when you start putting pictures with that information to solidify that information, man, now it got to be true. I told you they were dumb. Look at him. I mean, he's got dots in his teeth. Just tell me move next time that happens, please. Watermelon. Dice in his teeth. He's very happy. Slaves were treated good, I'm trying to tell you. Best thing that ever happened to him was coming over here. Look at this guy. He got him some watermelon. This was a postcard that was sent throughout the entire nation. Maybe they had a rebellion somewhere and they wanted to assure people that the slaves were happy. And so this kid looks very happy on this plantation. It looks like tobacco, maybe corn, I'm not sure. But the point is that he's a happy little kid. Now I know what you're saying. Mr. Ransom, come on, man. That's a long time ago. This stuff doesn't happen today. Well, this was about 4 years ago. And this is President Obama with his buckwheat haircut. He's 2 shades darker now Because the blacker you are, the more melanin you have in your skin, the worse off you are, farther you are away from white. That's not very good. And he has some fried chicken. And where did that come from? Lordy, I sure love campaigning. I've just shared with you guys the ideological part of white privilege, where this thought process has come from. It's constructed. It's constructed. The last part of my presentation, and I'm done, will be the subconscious part of white privilege, the part that most black people don't even know. When I was a little small boy, my brother and I used to pretend that we were Superman. We would get a towel and put on us. I know many of you guys did this too, probably. And we would run around the house and we would jump off of things. How I love Superman. Just as you guys felt when you saw your car, my brain thinks about Superman and I get a good feeling because I really enjoyed that time in my life. Every now and again at nighttime, I would, with my cape on, my burgundy bath towel, I would get in the mirror and I would stand there just like this. Just like that. Now, deep down inside, I didn't want to be Superman. But there were two things holding me back. I knew I would never be able to fly. That towel just wouldn't do it. But even more deeply and more sadly than that, I knew I would never be Superman because I didn't look like him. See, my friend Mark, and I'm not using tokenism here because I did have a lot of friends who were white when I grew up in Middlesex because most of my school was white. But Mark wanted to be Superman too. He did. He never mastered flying either. But one thing I can say about Mark is he probably did see that that superhero looked a lot like him, or more like him than I did. On Saturday mornings, my brother and I would run to the kitchen, and then we'd run to the TV and see if we can watch our favorite cartoons. But my mother never let us eat inside of the living room, so we had to eat in the kitchen. So we'd be at the table trying to eat our cereal as fast as we could, and we would read the cereal boxes. And again, I'm associating that time as good times. Yes, very good times. And I'm looking at my cereal boxes. Now, this is not conscious. I was much too young to understand this. But subconsciously, I was seeing white as good. And if you see white as good, then it's only natural that you're going to see black as bad. Then finally, I'd get into the TV and I'd watch my favorite cartoon. It was this guy here. Can y'all see him? Yeah, they had a lot of Tarzan. This was the one I grew up on right here, though. Now, this is another really weird thing when I think back. Tarzan was the king of the jungle. I'm assuming he was in a place where the people were melaninated, perhaps Africa. And these Africans have been there for tens of thousands of years, and they can't talk to the animals. He used to always talk to that monkey right there. And he understood him. So subconsciously, I'm understanding the process of white superiority. Even in the midst of where black people live, there's a white man that runs the show. My black father was an oysterman. That's probably why I took that oyster picture. He was an oysterman in Remlick, Virginia, a place called Buster Ferguson. And every year he worked hard. He was a hard-working man. He made sure our living room was filled up with toys for me, my younger sister, and my older brother. I didn't give my daddy credit, though. No. I gave all the credit to this guy. Again, my brain is associating good with white, even though it's my daddy's black hands that work for that money. Every Sunday, we'd go to church. I grew up Pentecostal, and so I was in church 8 times a week. And the Sunday school teachers always tell us that God created us in His image and all these wonderful lessons. And in my house, and not just my house, raise your hand if you saw this picture in your house. Again, no need to count, it's 100%. Now, so when I understood from my Sunday school teacher that God made us in His image, and then I went home and I saw this picture, I said, something don't feel right here. But nevertheless, when I prayed to that man. See, Pentecostals believe that Jesus was God. I prayed to him. So it was only natural as a little boy when I prayed to this man that I transferred his superiority to the people who looked like him. It was only natural. My dear friends, I gave you some examples tonight of those little small privileges that many of us don't even pay attention to, but have a profound impact. Oh, a profound impact. It leads to things like this: internal oppression. It leads to people of my complexion, particularly women, who might choose to spend $1 million on the bleaching industry to make themselves lighter. It leads to little kids sitting in the classroom, not ever quite able to see that oyster. So when my teachers, oh, I love my teachers to death, oh, they work so hard. But they can't seem to get that child to see that your work here in this education thing is linked to your success. They can't see that oyster. My dear friends, tonight, I want to thank you for your time. And I want to say that communication plus understanding leads to cooperation. And cooperation eventually will lead to respect and hopefully love. That's my desire. Thank you. Okay, I saw a lot of people taking notes. So this is what I'm going to ask. Before you ask me any question tonight, look at the screen and focus on that. No way you can be mean to me tonight with these.
No.
Okay, thank you guys. I think we got about 15 minutes for questions. Yes, sir.
In 2016, we had a black president, and we were talking about all the oppression. What can we do better in 2016, not 1700? What can we do to improve this?
Sir, I think we're doing it now. Absolutely. I think what we're doing right now is healing. People won't tell you now, but people are being healed as I speak. It's happening. It takes a lot more. It takes a lot more understanding, but you can't understand unless you're willing to communicate and listen to the other viewpoint. You have to listen. You don't have to even agree, but you have to take a moment to listen. That's it, sir.